Good evening. Welcome to Social Media 101. I'm going to give you a quick overview. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what social media is. I'm going to tell you 3 of the largest services and why you need to be using them. And then finally, a little bit about what's coming next in the future of social media and maybe what's on the horizon for the next couple of years. So first, social media. What is it? That's kind of the question on everybody's mind. You know, everybody has an idea of Facebook. But the question is, do you know what all these are? Anybody have any idea what all these icons stand for? No? Okay. Well, there's a wide swath of social media, and it's not just Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. It includes other things like sharing music, sharing videos, photos, pretty much any kind of content you can imagine. It's all information designed to be spread through the internet, through social interactions, and through people communicating with other people. So there's 3 big numbers that I feel like really communicate the scope of social media, particularly the 3 services that I'm going to show you guys tonight. First is 50 million. Now, there's 50 million tweets that go through Twitter every single day. Second is 400 million. There's over 400 million users on Facebook, half of which sign on every single day. And then finally, 500. Now, there's 500 of the Fortune 500 companies with executives on LinkedIn. So that's every single one of them. Now first, tell you a little bit about Twitter. Now, Social Media 101 on Twitter. First, it was founded in 2006. It's since become obviously almost ubiquitous as Facebook, MySpace, LinkedIn, YouTube, you name it. The basics on Twitter, of course, you get your bio, you get your name, the location, website, and of course, you know, who you're following, how many followers you have, as well as what list you might be on. And of course, a lot of terminology is on your handout as well, so feel free to resort to that if the terms don't quite make sense to you. Now first, in 2007, there was an average of 5,000 tweets going through the system per day on Twitter. Just 5,000. Now, there's over 50 million every single day. That's about 600 per minute, or per second, according to Mashable.com. Now, if we were to print Twitter, it would be about 150 billion words. That's about 190,000 copies of the St. James Bible. It's a lot of text, just from 140 character strings. Now, there's a lot of different styles for Twitter as well. Some people will just engage, some people broadcast information, and some people will just sit back and listen. And it's all kind of up to you. You have, you know, it's a very flexible system. One thing to remember too is that it's quality, not quantity. So it doesn't necessarily matter how much you tweet or how many followers you have. And that's a common misconception. Really, it's about how you're using it and the quality of the interactions that you have with people on the service. It's about what you learn from the service and what you want to get out of it. It's not necessarily about how many followers you have. According to Barracuda Labs, actually, only 21% of Twitter users are active. And now their definition of active is pretty low. It's if you have 10 followers, if you follow 10 people, and if you've tweeted at least 10 times. For someone like me, who tweets 30 to 40 times a day, that's pretty low. But really, it just goes to show you that Twitter is a very different kind of service. You can use it pretty much however you want. A very small minority of people actually produce the wide majority of the content on Twitter. So it's not necessarily all about posting content. It's also about listening. And there are lots of people who will just use it to listen, get the news, to find out information from their friends. Now, Twitter has also played a key role in a lot of important events. In 2008, for example, it helped elect Barack Obama. Through Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and other social media services, he gained a massive following and a lot of the youth vote. And he used that to get youth to turn out on election day. In 2009, for the Iran election hashtag, right there, you can see caused a lot of controversy over the summer as rioters in Iran protested the results of the election. And then most recently, of course, the healthcare debate has been all over Twitter. The Tea Party, for example, has come about almost exclusively through social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Now, in a Time article last June, the writer Stephen Johnson suggested that Twitter is becoming almost like plumbing for the internet. And now, one way to look at it is sort of, if you think of email as sort of the foundation for the internet, communications via the web, think of Twitter as sort of its step cousin, its most recent child. And it's allowing instantaneous communication among a lot of different people all at once. Finally, Alyssa Milano is a very prolific tweeter, surprisingly, former actress. And she's actually raised over $400,000 through Twitter, just for Haiti, just in the past month. What she did was she did a tweet challenge. So she donated $50,000, and she challenged any corporations to match her donation. Not only did 3 companies match her donation, but she also got her fans and her followers to donate an extra $200,000. And that's the power of Twitter. Just pretty amazing. Now, moving on. Secondly, I want to talk a little bit about Facebook. Now, how many people have a Facebook account? How many people don't? That's what I thought. So most everybody has a pretty good grasp on Facebook. But the thing is, Facebook isn't just about posting photos. It's not just about updating your status and telling your friends what happened in class today or at that party last night. It's also a business. Now, Facebook is not only the largest social network in the world, but it's one of the largest websites in the world, and it's rapidly becoming one of the largest businesses in the world. As of this year, there's over 400 million accounts, like I said. Half of them check in every day. If it were our country, it'd be the third largest in the world, ahead of the United States. Businesses have taken especially to Facebook, and almost every business that you can think of has a fan page. Starbucks, General Motors especially have really taken to the service. Starbucks is the 7th most active page on Facebook right now, and it has millions and millions of fans. Barack Obama, again, used it in 2008. He has over 8 million fans on Facebook to this day, despite his lagging poll numbers. And then, of course, Facebook is becoming one of the largest companies in the world. Just in the week of March 13th, it surpassed Google for traffic. It got more hits in 1 week than Google did. And think about how many times you visit Google. It's pretty fascinating stuff. It's amazing how much traffic a social network can drive. Now, there's been a lot of talk lately about Facebook's business side and how much it's actually worth. Because they're not listed on the stock market, no one knows exactly what they're valued at. However, there have been a lot of analysts saying lately that if they were to launch an IPO, an initial public offering on the stock market, they'd be worth between $10 and $40 billion, which would make them not only the largest IPO in history, but one of the largest companies in the world from the outset. Moving on, LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn isn't quite as cool or hip like Twitter and Facebook. Most college students aren't necessarily really active on LinkedIn, but most employers seem to agree that you should probably be on LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn basically acts as an online resume. You can post status updates, but they're professional. So it's going to be things like, I need a job, or what you have accomplished, or say I wanted to post this presentation on my LinkedIn profile so that other people could see it. That's the kind of things that you would expect to see on LinkedIn. Now, in addition to that, it's about the connections that you make. It's about getting introduced to people and building a professional network, not just a group of friends. So one thing that LinkedIn allows you to do is actually get introduced to other people. You can connect with people directly, and then you can use them to connect with their friends, and you build your network outwards that way, which is a really unique way of building a nice professional network for you to allow to get a job, hopefully after you graduate. Now, it's also sort of like an online resume, and your page doesn't update that much. It's not like Flickr or like Facebook or Twitter where it updates constantly and you always have something new going on. But instead, you share what you've been doing. What are your experiences? Where have you worked? What's your education? And it's all about making sure that that information is on the web and public. And I've actually had employers print out my LinkedIn profile and have it ready for the interview. So it is something that employers are doing. They are checking it, and it's worth looking into if you're planning on entering the professional world. Finally, recommendations. LinkedIn allows you to get recommendations from former colleagues and employers. As you can see on my profile, I've gotten recommendations from the American Legacy Foundation, the Senate Majority Leader's Office, and those really go a long way towards attesting to my skills and my abilities. And by having those on my LinkedIn profile, whenever anyone goes to it, they can see those recommendations. They can see what I've accomplished. And hopefully it'll look good for the employers. So, now that you've seen a little bit more about Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn that you might have in the past, what's coming next? Everybody's always kind of wondering what's going to be the next big thing in social media. Well, there's geolocation, which is one of the biggest trends of 2010. Already, services like Foursquare are gaining hundreds of thousands of users every month. Gowalla, Twitter, and Facebook have integrated geolocation into them. And basically what this allows you to do is not only tell what you're doing, but tell where you're doing it. So say I'm going to American University tonight. I checked in when I got here to tell people that I'm at American University. I could see what friends are here. I could get tips from cafes nearby that might be doing specials. Or if I check in at a restaurant, I can find out what's the best appetizer on the menu. Just because of people who have checked in at that location, all based off the GPS on their phone. Fascinating technology, and has a lot of interesting marketing applications as well. Secondly, journalism and its use in social media. Everybody knows that newspapers are definitely getting hurt by the recession. However, journalism has taken an interesting role in social media, and you're seeing people use it both on air. Take CNN's Rick Sanchez, for example. He's on Twitter while he presents his broadcast. He'll actually ask for questions via Twitter, and then he'll answer them. So it's sort of like interacting with your TV in a way. Then you have people like Jake Tapper, who's been really active on Twitter. What he does is he reports from the field. He'll tell you the news before it even hits the newspaper, before it even hits ABC itself. And he'll tell you while he's there, while it's happening. So say he's on the press plane going to Afghanistan with Barack Obama yesterday. He could tell you exactly what was happening as soon as he got there at 6 a.m. and nobody even knew the president was going to be there. Fascinating stuff. That's all I have, but by all means, follow me. These are my social media links. They're also on the back of your handout, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Wow.
Hey.
How do you respond to the ideas like Foursquare, I know, being too creepy, going too far, letting everyone know where you are at all times, and stuff like that?
There are certainly people with concerns about geolocation and privacy and things like that. One of the best things about them is that they're very customizable when it comes to privacy options. With Foursquare, for example, you can not only lock it to only your friends on Foursquare can see it, but you can make sure that you have specific people see it, or you can have it on Facebook and Twitter very publicly, like I do. There's some people who have been concerned about, if you check in on Foursquare, it means you're not home, so people could rob you. But at the same time, people have said the same thing about the voicemail and answering machines in the past. It's very easy to look up an address and a phone number in the phone book. Call, if they're not home. Who's to say they won't rob you that way either? Anything else?
I actually sat in on a phone conference the other day at work about the legalities of a lot of these social networking sites in terms of larger corporations, and that a lot of corporations now are having to create kind of comprehensive policies, not only for their corporate websites, but also for their employees' individual and personal websites.
Absolutely.
For example, for hospitals with HIPAA laws and the doctor's oaths.
Sure.
A lot of the problems now are that doctors will go in and take a picture of a patient and say, hey, look at this great surgery I did, upload it on their Facebook. Hey, guess what? You just got sued by your patient.
Right.
Where do you think the line is between all those kinds of things? And do you think some kind of comprehensive policy that applies to everybody in that field will be enacted? Do you foresee that happening?
Absolutely. The FDA has actually been doing hearings on social media policies in the past few weeks for drug companies as well as the healthcare industry. There's definitely a line that needs to be made. It depends on the industry, depends on the profession. I do social media consulting with my internship right now, and the one thing that we always recommend, first thing we recommend off the bat before a company pursues a social media strategy, is to institute a social media policy. And make sure you have something in your contract and your employee handbook stating exactly what can and cannot be published on social media, how employees should use it. Lots of different journalism outlets like the Washington Post instituted a social media policy just a few months ago. It's definitely an ongoing issue, and it's something that is still kind of being made as we go along. And a lot of industries are sort of tackling the problems as they see them come up. Healthcare is definitely an industry where it needs work, but it also has a lot of potential. One thing I love talking about is I've heard of a doctor who actually uses Twitter as a means of tracking symptoms. What he does is he assigns his patients a locked Twitter account, and he says, update this whenever you have a symptom of pain, or you have or you've eaten something and then all of a sudden you feel bad, and document exactly what it is and when it happens. So then all he has to do is print out a list of their Twitter, and he can see exactly how they were feeling, when they were feeling it, and what could have possibly caused it, which allows diagnoses a lot easier. It's really fascinating stuff.
How do these sites themselves raise revenue?
Most of it comes out of venture capital initially. Facebook, Twitter, all of them have come out of venture capital straight off the bat. Almost none of them make money initially. Twitter actually has yet to make a cent off of anything. Some services now are actually starting out with revenue models. Foursquare, for example, actually has a revenue model. They are profitable already, despite the fact that they just launched last year. So a lot of it depends on the company, but almost every single one of them starts out with pure venture capital.
Okay, and just for something like Facebook, since it is so large, what is their business model?
Now they're making all their money off of advertising. It's all advertising, the contextual ads, much like Google does,
Right.
but instead they're in your Facebook profile. And given that they have just as much traffic as Google does, they're making almost as much money.
That was actually one of my questions. The other question is, for those of us who are not exactly in the late majority, and not yet laggards, we're in the late majority,
Sure.
how tough is it, honestly, how tough is it going to be for us to get familiar and kind of integrate Twitter and all these other different accounts into our daily lifestyle?
It's not necessarily difficult to jump on them and to start using them. The question is how integrated do you want to be, and a lot of it depends on your personality. Not everyone is going to be as connected as I am, and that's totally reasonable. As a communications major, and as someone who's really fascinated by this kind of stuff, I'm expected to be everywhere as much as I can. For the average user, this much connectivity is not necessarily necessary. But for the most part, it's very easy to jump in and go. One of the key things that social media prides itself on is its ease to jump in. I mean, Facebook is very easy to jump in, set up a profile, and start making friends. Twitter is very much the same way. The problem with Twitter has been that people don't really know who to follow or what to read or how often they should update. And that still needs some work as far as communicating that to the general public.
On average, between all of these, how much time would you say you spend on a day-to-day basis, like updating things, checking things?
Between email and social networks, I'd say about 2 hours.
That's it, really?
And I do a lot of stuff on the go. So I do most of my work on my phone as I'm traveling.
So you have a couple, like, what are some of the bottom of these
Okay.
things in general?
Great. Well, I mean, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, obviously, you know. Flickr is where I host all my photos. So any photos I have from events, things like that go there. Last.fm is a music social site. So anything I listen to is put on there, and then I can share my music with friends. We can talk about, you know, our favorite bands. It'll tell me what concerts are coming up, stuff like that. Very valuable, actually. Posterous is basically my photo blog. It's a blogging software that you can use via email. So basically, you email in photos. I almost purely put photos on there, but I use it pretty frequently as sort of a complement to my regular blog. Delicious is a social bookmarking service. So bookmarks that instead of bookmarking them in my browser, I bookmark them on the web. You can tag them, they're searchable, and you can share them with people. So you can go to delicious.com/AlexPriest, and you can see all the links that I've bookmarked, and I literally have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bookmarks. And you can search them. You know, you can type in Twitter and see all the links related to Twitter, which is really, it's pretty interesting. A lot of good stuff on there, so check it out. Dig, finally, is it's a news website based off of user feedback. So people vote up or down on articles that they find are interesting, and the most popular ones rise to the top. You can submit new articles, and any articles I submit or vote on will show up in my profile, and then I can interact with other users who are commenting on those or updating articles. So yeah.
Okay, one last thing.
Sure.
What is your personal opinion on people who really use social media as a way of kind of just starting a fight? Like, you always see people on the blog who just want to start a fight. Like, what do you think about them? What's the right policy to deal with them as someone who is attacked?
As someone who is attacked, it
Yeah.
depends on your position. If you're a company, you should do your best to appease them. Within communications field especially, social media provides an excellent opportunity for handling crisis communications and turning crises into an opportunity. There are lots of documented cases where people have complained to a company or taunted a company about something, and then the company has come back and treated them very well, and they've come out and written a blog entry that just praised the company up and down and got more traffic than the original complaint did. So there's opportunities there. If you're an individual, oftentimes it's best to ignore it. So Twitter also has an option to block people, as does Facebook, stuff like that. So there are ways of dealing with particularly unruly users. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you.
That was a phenomenal presentation. I'm so glad it's recorded.
For what it's worth, I'll also have the Prezi that I used. It'll be online. I'll email you guys the link, as well as a copy of my handout with all the hyperlinks enabled, so you guys can just click on it and go through it instead of having to type it.